Worship in Islam was never revealed to confuse the heart or burden the soul, but to heal what life slowly breaks inside us. Allah knows the weight human beings carry, the silent struggles, the doubts, the exhaustion, and the emotional wounds that are not always visible to others. That is why worship comes as a mercy, not a test of perfection. When a believer turns to prayer, Qur'an, or dua, it is meant to bring clarity where there is confusion and peace where there is restlessness. If worship feels heavy, it is not because Allah wants to push you away, but because the heart may be overwhelmed or wounded. Islam recognizes the human condition and meets it with compassion, allowing space to breathe, reflect, and return gently without fear or pressure. Confusion often enters worship when voices become louder than the connection with Allah Himself. People may argue about forms, timings, and methods, and the heart begins to feel anxious rather than hopeful. Dr. Haifaa Younis teaches that true spiritual growth begins with self-reflection, not self-judgment. Worship is not meant to be reduced to a checklist that leaves the soul empty. When a person worships sincerely, seeking Allah's closeness rather than people's approval, the heart naturally finds ease. Islam does not demand robotic obedience, but conscious devotion. The moment worship turns into a source of fear, the heart needs reassurance, not withdrawal. Allah invites His servants to Him with gentleness, understanding their emotional states, their wounds, and their limitations. Healing through worship happens when sincerity replaces pressure. Ikhlas transforms simple actions into acts of deep connection. A quiet prayer offered with humility can heal more than loud words spoken without presence. Allah does not measure worship by how impressive it looks, but by how truthful it is. Many believers feel unworthy because they compare their worship to others, forgetting that Allah sees the internal struggle before the external action. Worship is a refuge for broken hearts, not a courtroom for judgment. When someone comes to Allah tired, confused, or emotionally drained, worship becomes a means of survival. It reminds the soul that Allah is near, listening, and aware of every tear, every doubt, and every effort made despite weakness. Islamic worship also teaches emotional intelligence by allowing space for gradual growth. A person may not always feel spiritually strong, yet consistency, even in small acts, keeps the heart alive. The Prophet taught moderation because the soul has rights and the heart needs balance. Worship that heals is worship that fits into real life with responsibilities, pain, and healing processes. Allah does not expect perfection, but persistence, rooted in sincerity. When worship aligns with mercy, it strengthens identity, dignity, and self-worth. Especially for women and those carrying emotional labor, worship becomes a source of empowerment, reminding them that Allah values their effort, intentions, and inner resilience. Even when the world overlooks it, true healing worship reconnects the servant with hope. It reminds the heart that Allah's mercy is greater than confusion and His wisdom greater than human opinions. When worship is understood as a relationship rather than a performance, the soul relaxes and opens. Every prayer becomes a conversation, every verse a reminder, every dua a release. Allah does not close His doors because someone is struggling. He opens them wider. Worship is meant to pull a person closer, not push them away, to soften the heart, not harden it, and to bring light into places where darkness once lived. In Islam, intention is the soul of every action, the quiet force that gives meaning to what appears ordinary on the surface. A routine may look impressive, structured, and consistent, but without intention, it can become hollow. Allah teaches us through the Sunnah that actions are judged by intentions, because the heart is the true place of worship. When a believer stands in prayer, recites the Qur'an, or makes dua, it is not the movement of the body that elevates the act, but the direction of the heart. Intention transforms habits into worship and daily actions into acts of closeness to Allah. Even the simplest deed, when done seeking Allah's pleasure, carries weight beyond what the eye can see. This understanding removes pressure and replaces it with sincerity, allowing worship to feel alive rather than mechanical. Routines have value in providing structure, but when they overpower intention, the heart can disconnect. Many people repeat actions daily, yet feel spiritually empty because their focus shifts from Allah to completion. Dr. Haifaa Younis often emphasizes that spiritual growth requires presence and self-awareness. A routine without reflection may continue, but it no longer nourishes the soul. Islam encourages consistency, but never at the cost of consciousness. When a person pauses to renew intention, even familiar acts regain depth. The heart begins to remember why it turns to Allah in the first place. Worship then becomes a meeting with the most merciful rather than a task to be finished, creating space for humility, gratitude, and genuine dependence on Allah. Intention also protects the believer from comparison and self-doubt. When worship is measured by numbers, length, or visibility, it can create anxiety and feelings of inadequacy. But when intention is central, the believer understands that Allah sees effort, struggle, and sincerity that no one else can see. A tired heart whispering a short dua may be closer to Allah than a long routine performed without presence. This realization heals the heart from perfectionism and fear of judgment. Allah does not demand uniformity in worship, but authenticity. Every believer comes with different capacities, responsibilities, and emotional states, and intention allows worship to adapt to those realities without losing its value. Renewing intention is an ongoing act, not a one-time decision. The heart shifts, distractions arise, and sincerity needs care. Islam teaches believers to check their hearts regularly, gently redirecting them back to Allah. Even when worship feels dry or repetitive, intention keeps the connection alive. A person may say, "Ya Allah, I am here because I need you." And that honesty becomes an act of worship itself. Intention turns moments of weakness into opportunities for closeness. It reminds the believer that Allah values truthfulness over performance and effort over appearance, creating a relationship based on trust rather than fear. When intention leads and routine follows, worship becomes balanced and sustainable. Actions flow naturally without pressure, and consistency grows from love rather than obligation. The heart finds peace knowing that Allah is aware of its struggles and efforts. Intention keeps worship flexible, merciful, and deeply personal. It allows the believer to return to Allah again and again, regardless of how imperfect the routine may be, anchoring the soul in sincerity and hope. Doubt is one of the quietest ways a believer drifts away from the Quran. It rarely arrives loudly or aggressive. Lie. Instead, it whispers questions into the heart, making a person hesitate, overthink, and slowly withdraw. Someone may begin to wonder if their recitation is correct, if their understanding is enough, or if their way of connecting to the Quran is acceptable. These doubts can feel heavy, especially for hearts already tired from life's struggles. But the Quran was not revealed only for the confident or the knowledgeable. It was revealed for the wounded, the seeking, and the struggling. Turning away from the Quran because of doubt is like walking away from medicine because the illness feels confusing. The Quran is meant to guide through uncertainty, not to be abandoned because of it. Many believers stop engaging with the Quran not out of lack of love, but out of fear. Fear of doing something wrong, fear of being judged, fear of misunderstanding Allah's words. This fear often comes from external voices rather than divine instruction. Allah never asked His servants to be scholars before approaching His book. The Quran itself describes being a healing and a mercy, not a source of anxiety. When doubts arise, the answer is not distance, but deeper, gentler connection. Reading even a few verses with humility is better than complete withdrawal. Allah knows the intention behind every effort and sees the sincerity hidden beneath hesitation, confusion, and emotional fatigue. The Quran has always been a companion for those in inner conflict. The companions of the Prophet Zaman turned to it during fear, grief, and uncertainty, not after resolving their struggles. Doubt does not disqualify a believer from the Quran. It is often the very reason the Quran is needed. When a heart is unsure, Allah's words bring grounding. When emotions are unsettled, the Quran restores balance. Walking away from it allows doubts to grow unchecked, but staying connected, even imperfectly, keeps the heart anchored. The Quran does not demand mastery. It invites sincerity. Every verse read with honesty becomes a light, even if the mind still carries questions. Islam teaches that growth is gradual and faith has fluctuations. Feeling uncertain does not mean faith is weak. It means the heart is alive and searching. The danger lies not in questioning, but in isolation. The Quran welcomes a returning heart again and again without criticism. Allah does not say, "Come back when you're certain," but rather calls those who are struggling, tired, and burdened. Doubt should lead a believer to ask Allah for clarity, not to cut off communication with Him. The Quran is where those answers slowly unfold, where peace enters quietly, and where understanding deepens over time. Remaining connected to the Quran despite doubt is an act of courage and trust. It is a statement of hope that Allah will guide, clarify, and heal. Even when the heart feels distant, showing up matters. Even when understanding feels limited, recitation still carries light. Allah's words work on the soul in ways unseen, softening fears and easing confusion gradually. The Quran was never meant to be withheld from oneself as a form of self-punishment. It is a gift, a refuge, and a companion for the journey of faith, especially during moments of uncertainty. True closeness to Allah is not built through sudden bursts of intense worship that fade quickly, but through steady, consistent actions carried out with reflection and presence of heart. Islam teaches that even small deeds, when done regularly, carry immense weight with Allah. Consistency allows worship to become part of one's life rather than an occasional effort fueled by emotion alone. When a believer returns to Allah daily, even in simple ways, the heart slowly softens and grows familiar with divine remembrance. Reflection gives these acts meaning, turning repetition into connection. Without reflection, consistency risks becoming mechanical, but when thought, awareness, and intention are added, worship becomes nourishing. This steady return to Allah builds trust, stability, and a sense of spiritual safety that protects the heart during difficult times. Reflection is what transforms routine worship into a living relationship. Reading the Qur'an without pausing to absorb its message may fulfill an action, but reflecting on even a single rise allows it to settle in the heart. Dr. Haifaa Younis emphasizes that tazkiyah begins when a person listens inwardly while engaging in worship. Reflection invites the believer to ask how Allah's words apply to their emotions, struggles, and daily choices. This process deepens understanding and personal relevance. When worship is reflective, it becomes a mirror, gently revealing areas that need healing and growth. Over time, this reflective consistency creates a quiet transformation, aligning actions with values and nurturing emotional and spiritual intelligence rooted in faith. Consistency also teaches patience and humility. A person may not see immediate change, but Allah works in subtle ways. Regular prayer, dhikr, and Qur'an recitation slowly reshape the heart, even when progress feels invisible. Reflection helps the believer notice these changes, recognizing moments of increased calm, resilience, or reliance on Allah. Islam does not promise instant results, but assures that no sincere effort is wasted. Consistency protects the believer from burnout and extremes, encouraging a balanced path that can be sustained through different seasons of life. This balance is especially important for those carrying responsibilities, emotional burdens, and internal struggles, reminding them that steady effort is enough in the sight of Allah. True closeness grows when consistency is rooted in mercy rather than pressure. Worship that is forced or driven by guilt often fades, but worship built on love and reflection endures. Allah invites His servants to come to Him willingly, not out of fear of failure. Consistency, grounded in compassion, allows space for mistakes and renewals. When a believer misses a moment, they return without despair. Reflection teaches self-accountability without harshness, guiding the heart back gently. Over time, this approach builds confidence in one's relationship with Allah, replacing anxiety with trust and creating a sense of belonging in worship rather than obligation. When consistency and reflection work together, the heart experiences true closeness to Allah. Worship becomes a source of peace rather than stress, and faith feels lived rather than performed. The believer begins to recognize Allah's presence in daily life, not only in formal acts. This closeness brings clarity during confusion, strength during weakness, and comfort during pain. Through small, consistent acts done with awareness, the soul finds stability and light, drawing nearer to Allah step by step with sincerity and hope.